together with Claire and I, so LPI, which is Learning Planet Institute, UPCT, and the MCAA, we conducted a survey last year, think about July, to understand the training needs of researchers who are interested in citizen science, who have experience, things like that. And we received a good number of responses, I think around 103, of which about 70 people, so here you can see our survey, and about 70 respondents said that they would be interested in joining such a network and gathering data from the needs that we discovered from our survey results. We made this together with Claire and I. We organized and developed this network of researchers for citizen science. We had our kickoff meeting back in December last year. And as Claire mentioned earlier, that today we mark the 7th training meeting. And Claire, if you want to tell people about the ECS Academy a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So thank you, Pooja. So this network is part of the European Citizen Science Academy, which is a work package or something that we're elaborating within the European Citizen Science project. So the Academy is just an online platform at the moment, and you will hear more about it probably in the future. So an agenda and introduction, just for you to understand how the network meeting will be structured. We will have a presentation from a network member. Then we will have a training on publishing in citizen science with as a panel discussion with 3 invited speakers. We'll have a moment for questions and answers as an open discussion format, and then a wrap up with a registration to the network as well. So stay tuned, stay with us until 3:30. So short and brief, this is our network member, Anna Berti Summan. She will present a project she founded called Sensing for Justice, which is a project, a Marie Sklodowska-Curie Individual Fellowship. It's a very hard word to pronounce. Sorry about that. And a research experience also. She will talk about her recent experience in publishing a book stemming from this project and the difficulties of publishing in citizen science related topics in citizen science journals. Also really highlighting how this is hard because it's not recognized in countries of origin, in Italy, as in the scientific field and also by academic accreditation systems. So go ahead, Anna, if the floor is yours.
Thank you everyone.
And I'll stop sharing the screen.
Many thanks. So thank you for tuning in this August day. Indeed, I am a network member. Also, I was very lucky to have support for 2 years from a Marie Sklodowska-Curie grant, and I could launch a project called Sensing for Justice, and the project researched how forms of citizen science, civic monitoring could foster the enforcement of environmental law through bringing evidence into courts. And this passion for the topic really came from my own background, which is in environmental law, and also the fact that before coming to academia, I actually practiced as an environmental lawyer myself. However, maybe in other fields, in other disciplines, maybe common to expand your publication to the field of citizen science. In legal studies, especially in my country, Italy, this is quite unusual, which created, let's say, some challenges that I will briefly share with you. So, I mean, first of all, I wanted to share the page of my project, the Sensing for Justice project. You should be able to see it. It's a website that I just created myself, so bear with me if it's quite artisanal. But it was always intended to be a repository both of scientific and non-scientific type of publication. So for example, if you go to it, and I will just drop the link, you can find from videos to facts to little leaflets and other outreach forms, for example, policy briefs. All this diversity of publication approaches, including, for example, a graphic novel, can be definitely an asset when the institution you're hosted by kind of recognize and value the diversity of, for example, formats, languages through which you want to convey your message. But when I had to kind of face the reality out there, so the fact that to build an academic career, especially in certain countries like Italy, you need to have a certification by an academic body. In Italy, is called ASN, like the National Scientific Accreditation. You need to prove a number of sectorial publications. So I was quite happy with the possibility, and now I will share another little piece of, for example, being having, let's say, the opportunity to publish in a book all the results stemming from the Marie Curie work. However, I soon realized that a book like this, Civic Monitoring for Environmental Law Enforcement, which has been very generously supported by the Marie Curie Action, by the Joint Research Center Open Access Fund that hosted my Marie Curie and supported with more than 10K of pounds to support the fully open access version of this book, so it could be really accessible from civil society to young practitioners. Still, in the end, is not considered purely law, nor purely, for example, political sciences or STS studies, science and technology studies. So in a way, I confronted myself with the experience of a network like the Marie Curie Network, the European Citizen Science Association, let's say a peer network, incredibly enthusiastic about this type of scientific output. Other communities like the Falling Walls, for those of you know it, science engagement community, science communication, very enthusiastic about it. But in my discipline, the legal discipline, is really a language, an approach that is kind of blurring the boundaries of what is traditional scientific publication. And I noticed this when I tried, for example, to get recognized the journal that you probably all know, Citizen Science Theory and Practice, in my own country, because journals have to be recognized by a committee to be included by researchers in their track records. And Citizen Science Theory and Practice wasn't recognized, nor for the two, let's say, applications that I did, namely in legal studies and sociology, which is really frustrating because I believe on Citizen Science Theory and Practice, there were discussions about environmental justice, about governance and political studies. And I think all of you know that Citizen Science Theory and Practice doesn't only host, let's say, purely environmental sciences-oriented subjects. So I'm still quite alone in this network in the sense that there are very rarely out there lawyers. But still, I believe that other Marie Curie alumni or network members have a similar experience. So I would like to maybe start thinking together how we can ensure that our national scientific institution values citizen science as a kind of cross-sectorial field that could be valid and valuable for our own disciplines, and it's not a kind of a big bubble that doesn't mean anything for the various disciplines. So I'm sure in other countries, for example, in the US, this is way less of a problem, but I would be curious to hear if you experience this in your country as well. So I think time is over, but I would be very happy to have any question in the Q&A. And also, thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Anna. Indeed, we will have the Q&A open discussion in the last half hour of the webinar. And I can just reassure you that, yes, this is a very common sentiment, and the questions we receive from our registrants this is a pain point and a common theme faced by researchers across the fields, where they do struggle with not just understanding where to publish, but not able to publish in the journals that they think that their research belongs to. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. I think it's very valuable, and I'm sure many people here would resonate with the sentiment too. And hopefully our speakers today can shed more light from their personal and professional experiences in the field. Thank you, Hannah. Claire, over to you.
All right, yeah, thank you very much, Anna. Now introducing to you our speakers of today that will lead the training on publishing in citizen science. So we have Jean Chansu, who has founded 2 community-based research organizations, including the Hispanic Health Council and the Institute for Community Research. She, by supporting these activities, requires competitive grant writing for government, foundations, and publications, including peer-reviewed journal article, book chapters, books, and dissemination through other creative means, among other things. So Jean brings this to the training on publishing in citizen science, as well as her experience as a founding member of the editorial board of the Community Science Exchange and as deputy editor of the Community Science Exchange Hub, which she will share with you afterwards. James Springs, Cornish born and bred, is a senior researcher in citizen science at Earthwatch Europe, based in Oxford, UK, and an associate editor of the Citizen Science Theory and Practice journal that Anna just mentioned, and alongside a member of several different European funded projects. Then we have Joseph Roche, is an associate professor in science education at Trinity College, Dublin, the author of the textbook Essential Skills for Early Career Researchers, a visiting editor for the journal Citizen Science Theory and Practice as well. And with his colleague Laura Bell, they designed a course called An Introduction to Academic Writing and Publishing for Citizen Scientists that you can also find on the EU Citizen Science platform. These are just snippets of their bibliography. Please go ahead and really look at all their work because it's not representative, but just to give you a brief idea before they will kickstart now the panel discussion. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Jean, James, and Joseph. And I think we can start with the first section about citizen science and publishing opportunities. And I would go ahead and ask Jean and Joseph to speak a bit about interdisciplinary publishing.
Jean, maybe you'd like to go first, and I can follow in if you wish.
Yeah, sorry, I'm being muted. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. It's really great to see so many people that share a common interest and passion. I think it's very important for all of us to build cross-national global networks that that support what is essentially a movement in science. And the building of that movement does make it difficult for us to publish, but I think the situation will be very different in 10 years. I wanted to start just with a couple of comments about how things are changing. I can speak most with more experience and knowledge about the US and even about Canada. I'm Canadian. Just to say that in the last, because of the pressure, particularly of a lot of people in public health and environmental science, the national funding organizations that fund research, like the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health, and some of their institutes have turned not only to supporting collaborative research and citizen and community involvement in research, but actually promoting the funding, the direct funding of community organizations to take leadership in identifying issues, gathering scientists together to work with them, and defining problems for the realm of science and for their own community needs. So that is a tremendous movement. I saw it 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, actually, in Canada, in the world of HIV. It failed because the scientists took the money away from the community organizations, but this time around, I don't think it's going to fail. It's just going to grow. So that is my first comment. The second is that I think you mentioned that I should say something about opportunities for publishing sort of outside of the traditional places that citizen science researchers and collaborators publish in. So I'm going to just tell you that there's a wide array of journals that I've published in and other people that I cite publish in that will accept a variety of different approaches to community and citizen science. I'm just going to list a few and then show you, because I represent the American Geophysical Union, which publishes, I've forgotten, Mookie, you can tell us whether it's something like 28 different journals, some of the journals that are open to community science publications. So in the area of, let's say, social and medical sciences, just to list, I've got about 12 of them here, but we have American Journal of Community Psychology, the American Journal of Public Health. These all publish international authors, of course. Implementation science, which is a way of transferring science into communities with community participation. That is the results of science clinical trials in particular. Health promotion practice, human organization, an interdisciplinary publication. Environmental health perspectives, a journal called Local Environment, Wiley Interdisciplinary Reviews, and the Journals of Public Health and Community Health Dentistry, believe it or not. So if you're interested in what people eat, that might be two journals you would never think about. So in terms of AGU, I'm going to share screen for just a moment to show you some options in AGU and then turn it over to the other speakers. Okay, there we go. You can see this material in the resources, but I wanted to show it here because it lists specific publications that might be of interest to citizen science authors. AGU Advances, Earth's Future, Earth and Space Sciences, which is very interdisciplinary now and very sensitive to community issues and broader based science approaches. You can see the many publications here for the previous one, and then water resources research. And this list is growing in addition to the community science exchange platform that I'm going to tell you a little bit about later on. So I think with that, I will stop and turn it over to Joseph and perhaps Jane.
Thank you, Jean. No one was allowed on this panel if your first name didn't begin with J, so it was an interesting criteria, but glad that we all made it here. So as Jean said, there are opportunities out there, and I guess from my perspective, I think something that's a little bit daunting about citizen science publishing is the fact that there are so many opportunities. And I know I can recognize some of the names on this call, but I feel like a lot of people on this call probably have a lot of experience in this area, but there's also a lot of people who are maybe coming to this for the first time, and they might be coming to publishing for the first time, and they might be coming to citizen science relatively recently. And I think it's important to note, at least from my experience, and I think you'll find all of us probably have slightly different perspectives on this, but I really think that citizen science, one of its strengths is that we are such a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary field. And it's really nice to come from different backgrounds, come from different areas, and then come together in our mutual appreciation and passion for citizen science. And I think when it comes then to publishing, that's a great strength, it's a great asset of our field that we have so much diversity of opinions, of backgrounds, of expertise, but it naturally has challenges as well, because we all probably do things slightly differently, and yet we're trying to work together and figure out how to publish together. And I guess one of the questions that seems to come up most is, if people are coming from different backgrounds, whether to focus on publishing in that specific discipline that they're coming from about citizen science, or whether they should target a citizen science specific journal. And again, that's open for people to navigate that as they see fit. I think one lesson that I find quite nice to think about is the idea pushed a lot by our favorite journal, the Citizen Science Theory and Practice Journal. I have to say that because I'm one of the associate editors on it. So of course it's one of my favorite journals, but it is a wonderful journal, and they're very clear guidance that to grow and strengthen this field of citizen science that we all love or have recently discovered and want to learn more about, probably the best rule of thumb is to try and publish the results from citizen science projects in the discipline where that project fits best. So if it's a marine science project, maybe you should try and publish the results of the project itself, the findings, the scientific findings, scientific outcomes in a marine science journal. That would be better probably for the field if readers from those type of journals of those specific disciplines hear more about citizen science and learn more about citizen science. But if you want to publish about the mechanics or the theory or the ideas behind the citizen science itself, then Citizen Science Theory and Practice would be a great journal to target for that. Or it's not just that specific journal, that's the one we all speak about, but citizen science by its nature, it is something that involves humans. It's going to have elements of social science by its nature. So a lot of different social science journals might be quite interested in citizen science publications as well. They might be interested from a science education perspective or a science communication perspective, and journals in those disciplines might be quite interested as well. So my feeling is that there's lots of opportunities, but don't be surprised if even within this panel we have different views. That's one of the great things about citizen science.
Can I just say one thing about what to consider when trying to decide where to look for a journal? It won't take very long. I'm going to show my screen again. I just want to show you this set of comments that I prepared. These are the things that I publish in many different journals for lots of different reasons, including the ones that Joseph mentioned. But I consider all of these questions. What is whether it's a question of emphasis, whether your emphasis is topical or methodological, process-oriented, or whether you have what the size of your volunteer network is and data quality, whether it's local case study. You can see all of these things on your screen, so I won't bother mentioning them, but I think that you should ask yourself this series of questions about what your desire is, what your wish is, and you can use the same materials to publish in a number of different places depending on your slant.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, hello everyone, I'm James. Firstly, to add to that, firstly, I would like to say that this panel discussion has been based around the questions we've already received. So if there's anything we're missing, shove something in the chat. If there's anything you think we're not covering that you're really interested in around these themes we're talking about, please let us know, because the three of us will probably inanely chat on forever about stuff without realizing. The only thing I think I would add on a broader scale is, especially around Europe at the moment, the word impact is being bandied around a lot. And one of the strengths of citizen science is we can have impact in a lot of areas that perhaps weren't the focus of the science to begin with. And this can feed into your publishing strategy, as it were. So whilst your study, your project might have a certain objective that speaks to a certain discipline, it'll have lots of other sort of knock-on impacts around education, society, methodological considerations, data considerations that might be of interest to other disciplines. Now, the sort of downside of that, of course, is lots of disciplines have different ways of publishing and different requirements and require different skill sets that often the scientist or the coordinator that started the citizen science doesn't have expertise in. So it's worth reaching out, to other people who might be able to use what you've done, and creating networks of citizen science practitioners, people interested in the methodology, to see what we can do about that. But also the other thing I would say is there's other ways of publishing. So if you don't feel comfortable writing a journal paper for a specific discipline, it might be a discipline that is a little bit reticent to citizen science methodology and so on. There's always ways of sharing the data, and I think that is often not spoken about a lot. So the data you collect and the methodology you can use could be shared in different ways and taken up by other people, with attribution or not. depending on how you want to do that. And of course, with informed consent of your participants, we might go on to that later. But there's lots of different ways of sharing this. So yeah, I think the strength of citizen science is the different areas of impact we could have. But of course, that brings its own challenges in publishing. Anna touched on as well the fact that things like Citizen Science Theory of Practice, I think, is a wonderful journal. I have to say that again. I'm an associate editor. But many countries, governments, many countries, academic institutions don't recognize it as a referenceable impact when it comes to that. It's definitely a problem in the UK. It seems like Anna's having more success in Italy and so on, but yeah, so there are pressures around that, but yeah, I would just say consider different ways of publishing as well, and reach out.
Can I address a question that just came up in the chat?
From Bruna, yeah.
Yeah, I think we all saw it. The question is, where do I publish a new measure or a new approach to methodology? And that's a really important question. I mean, I'm a methodologist. It's really frustrating to me that it's hard to find places, but I think that CSTP would be a really good place to publish a new measure or approach because it's process oriented. And I don't know, maybe I think others may have suggestions for that thought. It is super important to share new methodology.
Yeah, I agree. I think the like Citizen Science Theory and Practice as a journal, this is going to be a drinking game where every time we mention that journal, you can have a drink of your water or whatever you're having with your lunch. But I think that, that for many of us, that's kind of the automatic journal to think about when it's about citizen science, the process itself. So yeah, for Bruna, probably the new method, it would make sense. But maybe sometimes, I guess, Bruna, it might depend on the area you're working in, because if it's a specific discipline that, as Jane's mentioned, maybe if they're a little bit reticent to citizen science, maybe that it might be more difficult. But maybe a journal in that specific discipline could do with learning about this new method you found for citizen science, because it could then help the discipline itself, but also spread the word about citizen science to those people. But yeah, I think either approach could work, and good that you're already thinking about it. And definitely like something that I think we're all in agreement. Riparian vegetation monitoring. Okay, that's immediately outside my wheelhouse, but that sounds awesome. I think something that we should be encouraging more as well is you can reach out to editors. You can get in touch with people, and rather than like having to submit everything, you could contact an editor. Usually the editor likes to see that you have read the scope of the journal itself, and or you at least think what you're proposing would fit. And then if you reach out to them and say, I think it fits here, what do you think? Then they'll give you an honest answer about whether they think it's worth your while submitting it and putting it through peer review and seeing if the reviewers agree, or if they spot some reason why it might not be the best fit, and it might save you time then to go to a different journal, or they might even recommend other journals. So I think reaching out and getting feedback is very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this nicely segues into our second section almost about the differences between publishing in CS, for want of a better term, and non-CS journals. There's also a middle ground, of course, and this is probably, Jean could probably talk more about this in community science, but there's a middle ground of journals around human factors, human interaction, education, communication, which aren't specifically citizen science journals, but they're perhaps not specifically journals around the scientific topic. There's a middle ground looking at the human factor in all this. So that could be a really good place to publish methodological approaches. My background originally, decades ago, was astrophysics, and then I somehow got into citizen science through the Zooniverse, and I did my PhD in human-computer interaction. So a lot of my citizen science work actually ended up in human factors and human-computer interaction journals rather than citizen science journals. It was before CSTP existed. So, but they were quite open to sort of methodologies that were human focused and it involved human agency, as it were. So there is a middle ground that you can look at. And obviously other societal and social science based journals might be out there that look at that middle ground and are perhaps more suitable for methodology papers that the scientific discipline might be a bit reticent to take as yet?
It seems to me that the European network is in a really strong position to influence the field of publishing, because with many members interested in these questions of human factor methodology beyond the scope of an individual topic-oriented publication, there's room for another journal, for example, and there's, I think, room to encourage existing journals to create opportunities within their standard publishing approach. Like, I can't remember the name of the journal that I just mentioned, but they created a space for innovative new ideas in citizen and community science. So any journal can make a decision at the editorial level to do that if they feel that they can reach a new audience. So I would urge you to engage in that political process of advocacy to try to move the field forward, especially in methodology. The other thing I wanted to mention is that some of the new approaches to measurement in biological science and water science and air quality and so on should be and can be readily available to people working in communities who are taking leadership in citizen science themselves. And so there really is no place for those approaches to reach them. I mean, maybe there is, but I'm not very familiar with it. So I think we should think about that in terms of what Anna was describing, which is alternative ways of making information available through social media, through the internet. I guess what I'm saying is that authors are also advocates.
Thanks, Jane. If I may jump in really quickly, one of the aspects that came out in the questions was also to understand when we're talking about such varied fields of research, different journals, etc., but how to include more and more citizens in publishing, how to reward people, how to show inclusivity. So if you'd like to shed some light on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick off that conversation, because it's a big topic and something that I think all of us have to be aware of. Maybe there's people in this call who haven't published yet, and maybe you're excited about joining that. And for those of us who already publish in citizen science, we have to constantly reevaluate what are the best ways to tackle this. And I think my understanding from trying to figure out the best way to credit people in a citizen science project is to maybe make sure that we at least strive for inclusivity. And I think for many people that has always been, should we invite citizens who participate in a citizen science project to be co-authors? And people have done that. That's possible. There's been some crazy papers out there with thousands of authors, which is one way of crediting your citizens or your participants in a project who've helped you. But I think sometimes what's maybe even more useful is to let your participants or your citizens or your communities you're working with help guide you on what they feel is the appropriate type of credit for their work. So I think as academics, as people who are within the system and are judged by our papers and our publications and our impact and our citations, all that, we often think that's the important credit, is being listed as a co-author, because that's the type of credit that might be quite valuable to us. But for many people outside of the academic environments, that type of credit mightn't really mean anything. It mightn't be something that they value. It mightn't be something that they really care about. So perhaps we need to work harder to listen to those communities and have them guide us. Perhaps they would rather if we didn't list them as a co-author, but perhaps if we didn't just write up the results as an academic publication, but actually found a way to turn it into something that they might find more useful, like a handbook or a guidebook, or even just come back into the community to show them what the results of the citizen science project might mean for them, or to invite them to help us decide how we design a research strategy for what needs to be researched next. So I don't think there's any one answer. I think it'll depend on the particular participants or citizens in the project, but yeah, listening to them at least I think is a good start.
I think, Joseph, that you raised a really important point, which is also the point that Anna mentioned, and that is that, I mean, in many ways, we have a responsibility in doing research, you know, with communities or with broader networks of citizens to bring the data back. Because, I mean, they wouldn't be concerned about the issue. I mean, they wouldn't be involved if they weren't concerned about the issue, but they have a broader constituency. So perhaps involving them, some of them who are interested in that dissemination process, whatever it is and whatever works for them, might be one way to be inclusive. But I did want to raise the question of responsibility to bring the data home, whatever that home is, for use and ongoing use and capacity building.
Yeah, I mean, I think bringing it back perhaps more to a publishing perspective, there's sort of two facets to this. There's the ethical facet, and a lot of journals require an ethical statement and a data protection statement now. So there is that aspect where you do let your participants know what you're going to do with the data that they collect, how you're going to publish it, what attribution, if any, they might get, and so on. But then I work for Earthwatch. We're a charity, an environmental charity. So a lot of our communication is non-academic. So we look at how we can share the results in a much more accessible way. So we rewrite a lot of our academic work in newsletters and online posts and so on, and blog posts that are much more accessible to our participants, and we share it in that way. So that's another way. Sometimes there is a responsibility to citizen science, not just to think about perhaps the benefits to your own career in terms of citations and publications, but how you share this data, and perhaps more importantly, the next step, the impact that data has. So it's all very well saying we've collected all of this water data and the rivers are this dirty, but then what happens? Have you shared that with environmental agencies? Have you told governmental agencies? Is there going to be a policy that comes out of this? What are the water companies going to do with it, and so on? Which is very challenging, but sometimes it's worth looking at the next step as well. And I mean, it's probably a discussion for another time about the responsibilities of the scientist in this chain. So quite a lot of, at the beginning of citizen science, a lot of us got in just because we wanted more data and we weren't thinking about influencing government down the line. We were thinking about, I want more data to look at water quality. And there is a sort of ethical dilemma about how much responsibility the scientist has in terms of the social responsibility for the participants and the ethical responsibility. But yeah, I think it's key that you talk to your participants. How do they want to access the data? What do they want to get out of it? Do they want any accreditation or not? And what does that look like? So yeah.
You know, coming at this from a social science perspective, there is a science of dissemination. And I think many opportunities exist for studying that process of sharing data with different constituencies, not so much the policymakers, because we know a lot about that, but about other interested parties, especially those that don't regularly have voice in the way that science is conducted and the results are used, and sharing that in publications. I think we should be studying the process and promoting it.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting though, isn't it? Like just the thought that like we go from something that was helping solve problems, solving data, to now like we have the power to influence government and affect things. And with great power comes great ethical questions, it seems. So I think one thing that is very exciting about our field as well is that by its nature, citizen science has to be open. And look, there's lots of different ways to think of it as open, but of any discipline, it has to be open to people writing papers who might not fit the traditional idea of who an author could be or should be in other disciplines. So even like Mookie's addressed the question in the chat there about what happens if it's a minor. In citizen science, it doesn't matter about the person's age or qualification or background or experience. If the work stands up to whatever the journal is asking in terms of its views of quality, then they can be authors. And I think that kind of raises another question then about what do we do as a community to make sure people have that support to become authors if they wish. And I think the ECS project is a really good project to keep an eye on in that regard. There's the EU Citizen Science Platform that has so many resources and short courses you can do to help in different aspects of being a citizen scientist or conducting projects, and including up to publishing the results. And the ECS Academy, I think, will be a very, very exciting focal point for that type of work, where we have more of a responsibility as people in this field. The longer we stay in this field, we should be really making sure we're giving agency and support to those who might wish to become authors and leaders in a field themselves.
I'm wondering if, so I'm not sure if it's completely clear that we have someone coming from the community science aspect and the citizen science aspect, and together they are participatory forms of research at the same time. But I wonder if, Jean, you could elaborate a little bit more what it means to publish or to do publication in the community science, and then James and Joseph a bit more. How does publishing, does it follow exactly the same traditional line if you publish in a citizen science journal compared to other scientific journals? And maybe speak about publishing within the citizen science.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. So I guess the first thing that I'd like to say is that, we all share sort of a common conceptual framework when we talk about citizen science, community science, participatory science. We're talking, I think, about, to some degree, and I can speak directly to the Community Science Exchange platform, we're talking about communities of people and organizations at the ground level, not agencies. We can consider them as partners, but we're really talking about civic society. So, and in the case of community science, we're also talking about those communities that are being most vulnerable in terms of impact, environmental impact, and climate change impact. So those are voices that we're definitely interested in encouraging in participation in the science in terms of co-production and also in authorship. So I will say community science is a bit of a unique platform. It's a without defining the approach, I think it's better to talk about the platform. It was developed a couple of years ago to publish the science-based results of community participatory science. So the focus, we like to say that the focus is really results and impact-oriented. The science is emphasized, but the journal itself does not publish articles that don't have some relationship with community stakeholders, whoever they are. And the process of connecting with them, building relationships with them, I speak as a scientist now, and working together to co-produce the results is required in the journal, if only briefly. And there are specific rules, or at least descriptive categories, for what it means to participate as an author. So technically, most journals, I would say, allow for different types of contributions to authorship. This, if you go to the Community Science Journal, Wiley Journal website, you can see a long list of characteristics that permit authorship. So the journal, that I think you can, if you like, I can show you. Just a moment, I'm going to show you. Sometimes it's just easier to show. So the platform, what makes it a little bit unique and maybe parallels some of the things that are available through the European network, is that in addition to the journal, you can see this information in your slides. Sorry, In addition to the journal, there is an entity that is partnered to it called the Knowledge Exchange Hub. The Hub is a place for publishing all of the things that we've been talking about, you know, whether they're videos or project descriptions or guidelines or methodology or new measures or community responses. It is a location which is just growing now that offers people, including all community stakeholders and citizen science volunteers, an opportunity to share their work. Right now it's an archive, so you can look at, I think Mookie has given you the site, the URL for the site, so you can see what is located in the archive, but we will be building it out. So for anybody who's interested in, we'll have all of the citations will have DOI numbers. And I'm hoping we have a review process that involves scoring for quality and acceptability and resonance. And I'm hoping that there'll be more of a peer review process for materials on the Hub in the future. So I encourage you to look at the site and to consider whether you would like to post or offer materials for the site. And certainly, I think a lot of your work would be of interest to the Community Science Journal, for which Mookie and I are both editors. So I think I'll stop there. And if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to take them or answer in the chat.
Thank you, Jean. I think what I meant more was the collaboration that you have in the whole writing process.
Oh, that's highly variable. Oh, okay. So I would say that the journal allows for collaboration in the science process. Collaboration in the writing process is really variable depending on the project. And so there are no guidelines for how collaboration among writers should actually take place. But I can tell you that I've done many collaborative writing projects. And basically, I prefer to have partners meet, discuss what the paper should look like. They're usually people who want to write. Some people don't want to write. They might want to publish on the Hub or just share information with their communities. But the writing process, I have found works well when people, just as in a science project, work at the paper from beginning to end. They think about the theoretical framework together. They can do that. And think about the methodology and think about the main focus of the paper. And then if not directly writing it, they'll read it, critique it, and offer references. So that's a process I like. It's not suitable for everybody, but I think if you have volunteers who are interested in writing, it takes extra time, but the learning process is definitely worth it. I don't know if that addresses the issue that you're raising.
I think one of the questions that I think comes up quite regularly as well is how to start. Like, I think the first steps are always the most challenging for people if they haven't done it before, or if it is going to be a collaborative, as Jean says, it's highly variable on how people write together. I think if you're looking to learn how to publish in citizen science, probably one of the quickest things to do is, if you look at Citizen Science Theory and Practice Journal, everyone drink, then you'll see like the type of papers they publish. The quickest thing to do is just look at papers that are most cited, the papers that are most shared, read through them, compare them, and see the structure, the language, and then look as well at what the journal itself says it's looking for, it's asking for. And that's like, if you want to do it in isolation and you just want to work yourself through a way of figuring out how you can publish in that journal, that's one way to do it. Of course, probably a nicer way to do it, seeing as we're in a collaborative field, is to find someone to work with. And if you contact anyone who writes papers a lot and publishes a lot, and ask them, will they help you as you write your paper, they're probably going to want to do it. And I think that goes not just for us in terms of how we publish, but also those of us who have the benefit of running citizen science projects. If our participants or citizens contact us, then we probably have a duty as well. If they want to be involved in the writing process, well, first of all, we should invite them. And then if they do want to, if it is something they care about, even if it's just a very small role that because of their other life or their other commitments that they just want to be involved, we should probably be open to that. Maybe it's a little bit controversial, but I feel like if we as researchers and scientists, if we have the privilege of coming into a community and them helping us with our work, then if those people want to come into our world and become part of academic publishing, then it'd be very hypocritical if we didn't lend them the same support and help that they're giving us. So I think if there's a situation where someone, a scientist or researcher, is not willing to help their participants to empower them or give them voice in academic publishing, then maybe they shouldn't be as welcome in our field. But that's probably not something I should say out loud. James, I always feel like James knows citizen science theory and practice as a journal much better than I do. I'm a relatively new associate editor, but I was worried I'm going to damage his reputation.
I'm going to be the cynical one now. So there's sort of collaboration. It depends what we mean. So there's academic collaboration, right? And if we're honest in the room, you normally get the lead author writes it all, sends it around about a week before submission. Everyone nods, yes, that's fine. And then there's that one who makes about 500 edits the day before that you have to deal with and go. But as someone who works outside of academia now in an environmental charity, we do find it quite hard to get participants involved in the academic writing process, because I think they feel a little bit out of their depth. They feel like it is a long way out of their comfort zone. They feel like they might make mistakes. They will be judged on their writing. So it might be worth considering if they could, and this is where Jean's Community Hub, I think, is a really great idea, thinking about where they can help write other things. So they could help write scientific reports for the community, or help write best practice guidance for the community on how to do things. They could help write, they can help moderate training and so on. So we create lots of training resources that we try and get volunteers to help write the training, because obviously they've been there and done that, so they know what can go wrong, what can go right in terms of taking part. So there's lots of other ways of collaborating in writing that isn't academically focused, which perhaps is more comfortable for participants of your project to get involved in. And from there, I'm sure some of your really engaged participants might take the next step towards more academic writing and so on. So, we've had a few participants come to EXA conferences and so on, some of the more engaged ones. So I think it might be a stepped process rather than trying to involve participants in a big journal paper from the beginning. You need to sort of slowly introduce them to almost growing their confidence that they actually are making a contribution. They do know what they're talking about and so on. So yeah, as Joseph was saying, there's lots of different types of paper CSTP accepts. So essays, methodological papers, meeting reports. So maybe you could get participants involved in writing up a meeting report of some big workshop you did or something. So there's lots of different ways of getting involved.
One thing I'll add about the Knowledge Exchange Hub, and that is that we're very interested in having, let's say, artistic representations of science work, photographic exhibits or documentation, other kinds of things that volunteers might be very interested in contributing. So as long as they're described so that the audience knows what they mean and how to interpret them and contact the contributors or authors. So that's another way to involve people. But I also think that, part of our mission, one of the reasons I've followed community science, citizen science for many years, is that I see it as a way of engaging the public in a commitment to science, understanding what science means. And I think we've seen during COVID that the understanding of science is problematic in the broader community because it's an inquiry process. It's not a definitive process. So any form of engaging volunteers beyond data collection, it seems to me, is very valuable. I just want to say one other thing, and that is that working collaboratively to write is time consuming. So for new writers, you may want to find other means of acknowledging authors without writing with them at the start.
Thank you very much. There was another question, but maybe do you have another topic you'd like to jump on?
I think one of the common themes that we had in our from our registrants was that what we're talking about is the challenges or the opportunities within publishing, but at times, especially the early career researchers who don't have experience with citizen science, face a lot of skepticism if it's not a part of their grant agreement. A lot of skepticism from their supervisors, they lack resources, and then that trickles down to, of course, publishing in citizen science becomes even more overwhelming. So could you collectively probably share some experiences where early career researchers want to engage with citizens, want to involve citizen science in their respective research projects? How should they go about it? First, in like the supervision point of view, but also if they want to exercise publishing in citizen science with or without supervisor support, if that's even possible.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick off with the supervisor question, because I feel like that one is changing. I think now if you're an early career researcher and you decide you want to add an element of citizen science to your work and you bring that to a supervisor, I totally understand. Historically, I think a lot of us have probably been there for maybe people we're working with or the senior people in a research group or the supervisors. If they're not aware of citizen science or they haven't come across it, it might be like they start to automatically panic, like, are you spending your time in the best way possible? But I think for people who are a long time in the academy or in research, they're often persuaded by things like citations and impact, and also money. And certainly in the European perspective, which I'm usually limited to understanding, most researchers, even the ones who might be like a little bit out of touch with the world, they know that the European Commission is a top funder of research in Europe, and throughout its calls for funding now, it's mandating that you demonstrate societal impact or involvement of social sciences, humanities, public engagement, and the European Commission absolutely loves citizen science. Like there's been a lot of reports that's produced that you can point to the value it's putting on citizen science. Obviously, the European Commission wants more people to be involved in science so that they'll make informed votes, or sorry, they'll be more informed when they're voting on issues that will be very affected by things like climate change and energy crisis and vaccines and all those things. So of course, the European Commission could see why it's very valuable. But to try and convince a supervisor, really, it shouldn't take much more convincing than saying, if we want to get funded for this research in future, this is a really important aspect of our work that we need to show. And then if they're still skeptical and they say, well, what are we going to do with that? Like, you need to be focusing on your papers. You could say, well, in fact, I can publish a paper on this work in this incredible journal called Citizen Science Theory and Practice. And that'll be another Scopus Index paper that we can then share. And it might even be outside our field, which will get more attention for our research. So I think for the most part, supervisors should be convinced. If they can't be convinced, they're probably going to retire soon, or find someone else who's similarly senior in the organization you work with and ask them to help, and just navigate the internal political disaster you create for yourself for that. But I do think it is improving, but I don't know, maybe Jean or James might think differently on that one.
I'll just comment on graduate student supervision. It's been my observation that graduate students are basically not encouraged to do citizen science or community science work because it's inefficient, too time consuming, they don't have the resources and so on. So, but there are approaches, including perhaps an organization like James and organizations that I've created that are boundary spanning organizations that can facilitate entry to communities and community partnerships or other stakeholder partnerships or broader based populations that reduce the inefficiency or the time that it takes to build relationships. So, encouraging university departments to partner with those organizations, to learn from them, helps to build support both for faculty and for students. The other thing that we found is that providing small grants, if a department has or a school has the opportunity to provide small grants for faculty to develop a citizen or community science project, that really helps. So I think we can have impact at different levels of the system as we're trying to change the science.
Yeah, I mean, on the back of that, as Jean says, we do co-supervise students as an organization with universities. So that could be an approach you could take if you're struggling to find a supervisor within your university to help out. You could say, yes, but you don't have to deal with that point. We've got this organization that will help with that. I think, again, cynical James, I would take a little inward look about and think about why you're using citizen science. So I'm a bit old school, and I got into citizen science because there was no alternative. There was a need for it, right? There was too much data. There wasn't enough scientists. We needed help to collect the data. And that makes it a lot easier to sell to a supervisor. You say, I'm going to get 100 times more data from a much broader area if I do this. That's an easier sell. So do have a think about what the focus of your work is. And if the focus of your work is the science, make sure it is the best approach, because it can be hard to defend something when your supervisor might be right. And I know, don't shoot me, but citizen science is not the best solution for every scientific problem out there. There's lots of reasons citizen science might not work, and your supervisor might have a point if there are better methodologies, more efficient methodologies out there. So yeah, get your defense lined up, I would say. Another thing to mention, I think, and it was a question that this is very discipline specific. So some disciplines who are perhaps more mature in the citizen science landscape are much more open to this. So I was an astronomer to begin with, and they started using citizen science way back in 2009. And so it's very accepting of the citizen science approach now in terms of analysing the vast amount of data that's available. Same is true of a lot of ecological disciplines. But it's not true of all disciplines, and it's changing. We need to help that change, I think, and there's lots of ways of doing that. We could there's trying to get your work into journals that perhaps it doesn't fit. I've been through that process with planetary science. It took me about 3.5 years to get my citizen science paper into that journal, and it was a long process of revisions and trying to explain to the reviewers why it is a legitimate methodology to take, and it was hard work. But the more of us that do that, the quicker that process will become and the more accepting it will be. Special issues are a great approach to take in journals. So citizen science theory in practice, take a drink. We're always looking for new special issues. So if you want to do a special issue on marine science, or Bruna, a special issue on the subject that I've already forgotten, that might be a way of opening the area as an early career researcher. I think that could be a way of pushing your agenda, for want of a better word, into new disciplines. But it won't be easy. No, there are some disciplines which are quite young to citizen science, and you will have to convince people of that. Just hold up pictures of people like Mookie and Karen Cooper and so on, and look, this is legitimate. Look at these people.
I'd actually think. Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Jean. Sorry, apologies.
I just wanted to put in a plug for special collections, and to say that one of the advantages of the American Geophysical Union network of journals is that it offers the opportunity for interdisciplinary special collections. So I would say that community science is very interested in anything that involves the whatever community is defined as participatory effort, but the other journals will enter into a special collection if the topic is appropriate for them. And you can see from the resources that I have provided how that works in terms of special collections. So really, you should think also about the community science platform as well. And of course, we work together. We're cross-referring with CSTP and in terms of publications that are suitable for one journal platform versus the other.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you so much, Joseph, Jean, and James. In the interest of time, I'd like now like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Anybody, if you'd like to unmute yourself, ask any question, share any experiences within or around publishing in citizen science in your research work. If you're a little bit shy, you could also put it in the chat. No worries at all.
Putting us back all together so we can see each other.
Yeah. I think it's been an interesting discussion touching upon different aspects of publishing in citizen science from journal perspective to early career researchers. One of the things that James mentioned early on was around impact, and we didn't deep dive into it just at the start because we wouldn't have been able to proceed at all. But I think that's such an interesting topic in itself. And what does impact mean to you? What does impact mean to your research? What does impact mean for your grant agreement? I think these are all such important issues which, if we talk about early career researchers, do not have that much of control over. They have to kind of go with the flow of checking the KPIs and following the rules. And as you said, James, towards the end, that it's very rightly so, citizen science may not be the answer to every research project. I myself was a stem cell researcher once upon a time, 2 years ago, until 2 years ago, and I did have many opportunities to engage people via public engagement. So that's another thing people could try out to educate the society and even involve them in certain ways. Yeah, Claire, would you like to share any thoughts on that?
No, not really. But I'd like to give maybe the floor to the question that we have on the chat. So it's from Anna, and to the 3 speakers asking, how can we try from within the citizen science community to push for greater recognition of citizen science journals in sectoral disciplinary evaluations, accreditations by national scientific committees?
Yeah, that's not a fair question. Next. No. So this is obviously going to be very country specific. I think in the UK, I think it's very difficult. So we have the research excellence framework that we have to fit within the reference, and basically your work has to be publishable in a returnable journal for that framework. So from my astrophysics background, that was very difficult. Citizen science. So the Citizen Science Theory and Practice Journal, for instance, wasn't returnable in that way in my department. So for me, from a UK point of view, it was about looking at how I could get citizen science data and methodologies into other journal papers, which can be challenging. How do we get greater recognition for CS at a higher level? I'm open to suggestions. I think in the UK that can be difficult. Not to get too political, but a lot of the funding bodies have agendas, rightly or wrongly, around specific research approaches and so on. I think it was mentioned the European Commission, a lot of the funding now pushes open science, pushes a sort of societal aspect, pushes involvement of all stakeholders, which of course can involve citizen science. So I think that is one way of really pushing the importance of CS and the contribution it can make. Yeah, I think I mean, I sort of agree with Joseph. I think it's improving, and I think we will get there. But I think at that level, it's difficult. I'm open to anyone to give me suggestions, but yeah, I think it is. It's almost banging your head against the brick wall a bit, but we're slowly getting through that brick wall, I think.
There are several strategies on this side of the pond that have been tried. that I'll just mention, because I think that ECS, has a lot of potential power and influence to consider some of these options. One is to develop within ECS a group of people who are willing to talk to departments and schools about recognizing impact and in different arenas as part of the promotion and tenure or recognition process. It's slow going and it would take a lot of work, but we have tried that in my world of anthropology. We've tried that, and we have actually reviewed departments and critiqued them based on the fact that they're less than they should be interested in impact. The second is to do exactly what ECS is doing, and that is to create training materials and other things that can be turned to by academic departments and schools and journals to demonstrate that the field is growing and significant and has impact. And the third is the review process that public health put into place some time ago that offered peer review to people with public health has been very powerful in this movement in the US. Community participatory work has been evaluated for its scientific quality since 2004. And so gathering the schools and departments, because you have all of Europe to be working with, maybe there are collaborative efforts that can look to reviewing alternative forms of publication. So this is all political movement within the realm of science, but we are, after all, involved in the politics of science. So I just encourage you to be innovative and within your time constraint.
I think Christina's point in the chat is very interesting as well. Maybe Christina, you might want to come in and mention that point you raised.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Just saying that from my point of view, I mean, I am a researcher at the University of Parma in Italy, so I'm aware about the Italian situation of the academia. And for example, in my experience, it was really very hard to introduce citizen science inside my university. But one way that I found was focusing on the third mission. That is now something that the researchers are evaluated for, or at least the university. So now in Italy, universities are evaluated for the research field, for the education field, and also for the third mission. And this could be a way to introduce citizen science, because basically citizen science is interdisciplinary, you know? So you can then you can do research, you can do teaching, and you can do third mission. But since there are not a lot of people that work on the third mission, that could be a way to go inside, you know, to help your supervisor to understand that this point is valuable. And then when they started to understand what means citizen science and that citizen science research is easier. That's more or less the contents of my, yes.
Someone just asked in the chat, what do you mean by third mission?
Yeah, the third mission, I mean, in Italy is everything that is connected with the relationship between academia and society. So it can be public engagement, for example, but also it can be a technological transfer from the academia to the enterprises. So everything that is connected with the idea of open the university to the society. So it's a very broad field where, I mean, you can work on it.
Thank you, Christina. Go ahead, Anna, and then we will wrap it up for the last info.
I fully agree with Christina. At the same time, I also have the impression that sometimes confining citizen science related activities to the third mission is very political and instrumentalized as a way to like say, oh, this is a nice to have, like some engagement and outreach, but not recognized as the primary work that we do as researchers. And I see a problem there in the sense that I have the impression that sometimes people expect that you do third mission on top of all the rest in your extra time. And many researchers say, well, this is not my priority, which I think really shows a bit the limitation of like youngers doing extra mile to do also comply with the third mission discourse, but sometimes then getting it not recognized in your actual evaluation, whereas it's key, for example, for indeed EU fundings application. So I would say the third mission, which probably is a much national Italian rhetoric, is not common in other countries. It's central, but at the same time we should be careful to not let big citizen science confine to the third mission.
Yes, that was I was suggesting, is to use this in a way as a way to let citizen science know inside the academy. So I mean, it can be a way to, I mean, a door that you can open to enter, and then give you the possibilities to reach other aspects of the academia. But I agree. I mean, the risk is that we are confined only in the third mission. But I mean, it depends. Yes. My experience is more in the Italian, from the Italian side. I don't know, in Europe maybe it can be different, but consider this. So for example, now at our university, we are evaluated from the ministry, the Italian ministry, also for the third mission. So I mean, that's important, because for the university, they have to produce projects that are evaluated for in the third mission field. So I mean, that's important, because the ministry recognized this part.
I know we're probably coming towards the end, but just like a quickly comment on something that I think probably links the two, because both perspectives there I think are completely touching an issue that we have, where there is a lot of great attention for citizen science, a lot of goodwill, a lot of support, but there are inherent challenges as well. And I think I'm guilty. Like, it's good to have cynicism. Sometimes I'm the other end. I'm too naive. But I think it's good to recognize. Like earlier, I was saying how it's great that the European Commission has such a focus on citizen science, and we wouldn't have that if it hadn't been for people like Muki who have drawn attention to it and lobbied and made sure that the field gets recognized at the highest levels. But even the Commission, as much as I praise it, it has kind of almost gone the other way a little bit, where it used to fund citizen science projects more directly under a scheme called Science with and for Society, which is kind of more of a third mission type approach, where a lot of us really like working and like doing our research there. But as an entity, it then decided, well, actually, this is so important for everything, then let's just make it part of everything. We don't need a separate area. So now things that involve society and public engagement and citizen science are now kind of expected to be part of everything, which is good. It's good for lobbying. It's good for helping supervisors realize how important it is. But it would also be great if they kept funding it separately for a few years more, so that we could build more capacity. But I guess, yeah, you can't have everything.
It's very interesting. Thank you very much for the exchange. I think it's been wonderful, and well, least but not last, I mean, first of all, Pooja, thank you very much, James, Joseph, and Jean, for intervening and giving this talk and giving your insights into all the questions that we received from the network members. Thank you very much. And also Anna, for presenting your work and to sharing also your difficulties that you've had in publishing in citizen science, but the fact that you've managed. So congratulations also. Now we're just going to briefly show you last slide, because some of you are perhaps not part of the network of researchers for citizen science, to which normally we publicize these trainings too, but this time it was also published in social media. So we would like to share with you a QR code for you to register to the network if you are interested, alongside some more information about our next meetings. So let me just share this slide with you. I hope it's all good. Oops, no. Okay, here you go. So we've had, this is our 7th, and we'll have another one in September, which I think we will probably change the date, but we'll keep you tuned on data quality and citizen science. And then we'll have another one on impact evaluation. Generally, these trainings, this was a unique opportunity, let's say, to have 3 trainers come on. But usually we just have one with a PowerPoint presentation, and let's see what happens next time. But so you can expect 2 more trainings and 2 more network meetings. And then in November, we will have a last one before we wrap it up for this year, which will just gather everyone and have an evaluation of how it's been to be part of this network and part of this training, and also communicate to you a next training series that we have in mind for January. So yeah, please, I hope the QR codes works well, but do sign up to the network if you're interested.
Thank you, Claire. I'll also put the link in the chat, just because we had a comment where the QR, they're not able to scan. So I'll just put the link in the chat as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. And next, so just to let you know that the resource, what's coming out of these network meetings for the moment are 7 recorded webinars that will be uploaded on the EXA YouTube and also on the MCAA YouTube channels. There's going to be PowerPoint slides from trainers and also network members that have presented. And also we are actually crowdsourcing your questions into documents so that they become a source of materials, a resource in themselves on what are the questions around the topic that we are covering. So thank you very much. With that, we can wrap it up. Thank you again for the talk and for the communication. Pooja?
Yes, thank you, everybody, especially our speakers today. Anna, Joseph, Jean, and James. Thank you, Claire, as well, for the moderation, and everybody for joining in and being a part of this in our hour-and-a-half webinar series. Thank you, everybody, and hope you have a lovely weekend ahead. Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.